This podcast is sponsored by Systems Accountants, a specialist global resourcing solutions company focused exclusively on accounting technology and finance transformation.
When the time comes to hang up those rugby boots as a professional or semi-professional rugby player, and that day is inevitable, the daunting question to ask is, what do I do next? Well, someone who is faced with this question from concerned players on a regular basis is International Rugby Players Association CEO Omar Hassanein. Omar, thank you for joining us on the Rugby Business Network to provide your insight and expertise in this area.
It's a pleasure.
Omar, without a doubt, you are leading the way when it comes to assisting players with the intimidating transition process from the rugby field and into the business environment. What sort of support services do player associations offer once players retire?
We as players associations, I guess, perform a few functions. I suppose our more core function for existence when we're all set up is the trade unionism arm, which is the, for want of a better expression, which is the player representation side, the collective agreements that we do with our governing bodies. Mm-hmm. But then the other big arm of what we do is player personal development. So I guess we're responsible for looking after every aspect of the player off the pitch, whether that be career development, personal development such as mentors and networking opportunities. Personal brand is another area we work on, trying to, because they're suddenly hitting stardom and are sometimes a bit shocked by what to do. Financial management's important. That's the fourth area that we work on in Ireland. And the fifth area is player wellbeing, so mental health and those sorts of aspects. So we believe they all combine to not only helping the player eventually transition, which is a daunting task, as you say, but also during the career, we believe it's related to performance, and coaches in all sports around the world are starting to discover now the concept of a balanced athlete being a better performing athlete. So we would certainly go by that mantra. Now, in the implementation of all those areas with the athlete, we like to get in early. So we work in ensuring our academy players have studies under their belts, and that there's constantly something that they're doing throughout the career with our personal development managers, which are the people we have employed at each of our teams to work closely with the players. And I suppose I finished this sentence with one sort of I guess comment that I've lived by for years, which is that I talked to a very high-level employer a few years ago here in Ireland, and he said, one thing I look for with athletes is no gaps in their CV. So we tell our athletes, don't leave any gaps. Finish a course, do something else. And then eventually when you transition, it'll be much easier.
Well, when you were a professional rugby player yourself at the Waratahs in Australia and then in France and Italy, where your playing days came to an end 10 years ago, I believe that you were unemployed for 8 months following your retirement. Tell us what challenges you faced in trying to re-establish contacts in the business community.
Yeah, it's a good question. I played also in Japan for a few years, so I was away a good few years following my time in Australia, and I finished in Italy and then moved home without a lot of networks. I think that's what we're trying to create with our players, is building the networks around them. But it's very hard when you're an Australian guy from Sydney and you're living in the north of Italy and you're coming back after years to look for a job. So it's a hard thing. I think you hear this saying getting bandied around that, this loss of identity, etc. And what does that mean? For me, it's a very real thing. It's not just a fluffy term. I mean, I really did struggle. Players struggle a lot more than I did. I was fortunate to get an opportunity, coincidentally, with the Players Association, who I was chasing the opportunity with, or who I was going to try and facilitate an opportunity. But players, we deal with players every day, very intelligent guys, 3 or 4 years retired, still in no man's land. And it's a difficult period. In fact, we ran a survey here. We run them all the time, but one that struck me about a year or two ago here in Ireland is we surveyed all past players, retired players, and we found that 31%, so virtually a third of them, 2 years after retirement, still felt lost in the world and still felt like a fish out of water. So that's a third after 2 years. And I guess people think that, within 6 months, they'll all be all right. It's actually not the case. And that loss of identity is very difficult. The tragic case of Daniel Vickerman, someone I've known quite well over the years, was because he didn't transition well. He didn't. He couldn't grasp a new identity beyond rugby, and that's very difficult. So they're the sorts of things we try and tackle.
Well, Omar, how often do you see retiring players come to the numerous associations you have been with, at both past and present, looking for career advice, as opposed to players just going on it at their own? Is doing this risky?
No, I mean, someone has to do it, and we're the natural body to do it, because throughout their careers, we're not conflicted in any way. Our sole mandate is to represent players and best interests, and so if governing bodies ever try to manage them, in my experience, that never goes as well, because players are reluctant to give information about potentially their mental health or about their struggling with career opportunities, because they don't want the coach to know that they're vulnerable potentially in any way. So it becomes conflicted. So we're naturally the body that should be executing these types of programs. I think, to answer your question as to whether players engage us or not, I mean, the answer certainly here is very much so, and in most of our rugby countries, the answer is very much so. But it's only because we've built credibility, and you need to do that over the years. If you're not placing guys in work experience opportunities that lead to employment, if you're not getting them into meaningful personal development opportunities, then they're not going to come. They're going to try and do it on their own. So I think testament to our success is the fact that they keep coming back well into their retirement years as well.
Well, Omar, as much as you and your amazing team do there at the International Rugby Players Association, when it comes to assisting past players get into businesses, I'm sure there's some challenges, if any, that you encounter from various businesses in terms of making themselves available to these players?
Yeah, look, most businesses, particularly, I guess, in countries I've worked in, like Australia and Ireland, the sport of rugby union is closely affiliated to the corporate world. So most businesses are very accommodating at trying to wanting to have players in their office, but for meaningful engagement, not just stand by the photocopier and look good, as far as, we've got a player in our office. That's where we're very selective about the corporations we engage. We want to make sure that they're engaging for the right levels, and generally for the right reasons, and generally they do.
What do you feel businesses could do more when it comes to helping retired players with career transition?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of skills and attributes that players have that have got, or that athletes generally have at high level, that have got them to where they are. Things that are inherent in their DNA. I think you have to be resilient. You have to have a strong sense of teamwork and trust and relying on the man next to you. You have to, you have to have, I guess in a lot of cases, intuition. You need to be able to read things and, persistence, as I said. So we feel that our athletes have that in spades. So, I think the opportunity is there for businesses to get real benefit out of bringing athletes in during their career on a part-time basis, and then grooming them for potential full-time employment. The problem is, if it's not happening during their career, no matter how smart the guy is, he's trying to go from 0 to 100 in a few months when he finishes employment. And a 30-year-old's never going to be able to catch up 10 years' work that quickly. So I guess the key is the engagement throughout. Our players generally have every Wednesday off, and they have half days off at other opportunities. And we like to link them up with businesses during those times.
Fantastic. Well, from what you have witnessed while at the numerous players' associations you have been at in the last decade, how strong a relationship is there between the associations and the various businesses that have made their services available to the players?
Yeah, very strong, and that's really important, and that's why, when you build your staff and you have player development managers at each of your teams, you have tentacles out all over the country, and that's what we try to achieve. Equally, you can get a lot of overlap. We have a few commercial partners which we obviously need to run our players' associations, and that funding is very crucial. But those partners we engage on a number of different levels. So the sponsorship element's one, where we might have player appearances where players go out and into social environments, but we make sure that those companies are big companies, like in Ireland, for instance, Zurich or Bank of New York Mellon. We make sure those organisations are bringing players in and fully get what we're doing, which they do. And yeah, it's about having reach, but it's also about having I guess that quality, that depth of relationship that exists on a number of levels,
To follow up on that, Omar, in your opinion, do you think there are enough businesses making a difference currently in career transition?
No, I think there's still a bit of a lack of understanding, or a full understanding as to what athletes can offer. I think there's some companies would look at former athletes or athletes about to retire at age 30, 32 and go, oh, well, they've just missed the last 10 or 12 years of practical experience. But they haven't. They've picked up probably experiences that the employee that's worked from 20 to 30 might take a lifetime to get. So I think it's an education thing for us to say, listen, these guys are a little bit raw, but their acceleration curve is going to be pretty damn quick. And that's, if you get them in your business, you've got the right calibre of people. And it takes the right calibre of people to represent the Irish national team, the Springboks, or the All Blacks. It takes the right calibre of person. Yeah. So that's what we promote.
Omar, from your experience, do you find players, when they retire, whether it's professional, semi-professional, and they come to you for help, are they looking to get into businesses that are rugby related, or are they looking at something completely different?
Yeah, good question. A bit of a mix, actually. A lot of guys, probably too many guys, want to get back into rugby because they see it as an easy pathway, and then they eventually realise that there's a very limited number of coaching positions or commentary positions available. I was fortunate I could take a different route myself and get into players' associations, but I was quite lucky that an opening came, all those 10 or 12 years ago, and then I've made the most of that opportunity since. But the fact is, yeah, a lot of them want to get into rugby, but yes, also there's limited opportunity. So the other area that we encourage our players to try and study in, if they're academically minded, and they're not all academically minded, but if they are, a generic sort of business course tends to give you a broader range of options, and then you can specialise from there if you've got that as a base, and so a lot of guys start with that, and then they sort of, I guess, focus in on finance or marketing or whatever it might be that they're interested in. But yeah, look, there's limited opportunity in rugby, and players need to understand that too.
Finally, Omar, when do you think is a good time for a professional or a semi-professional rugby player to start thinking about the career they want to pursue once they decide to retire? And what advice would you give them?
Yeah, well, look, the answer to that is that I think they should be thinking about it when they're 18 or 20, and that might sound a bit funny, but guys are coming out of school now and getting contracted, and they have zero life experience. I was contracted with the Waratahs when I was 23, so I had 4 or 5 years of knocking about in different jobs whilst I was studying and just gaining life experiences. I think without those, our guys can go from 18 to 32, potentially 14 years career, and they still don't know how to do their own banking, or they still don't know how to go through an airport properly, because someone's done it for them every time. So we say to them, listen, you need to be independent people from those early ages. You need to get your building blocks in place right from your academy level and have it at front of mind. It's not always the way that players think. You see this thing around 27, 28, 29 years old where players a lot of the time will panic and go, oof, geez, I haven't done much. And then suddenly they're hounding our player development managers every day for opportunities to get out there and do all sorts of things. And it's great, but equally we want to try and push that realisation a lot earlier so that it doesn't happen at age 27, 28. Because, the reality is you could get an injury at age 22, 23, 24, and you're all over. And if you haven't thought about it, well, you could be in a really bad position because you put all your eggs in one basket.
Definitely. The earlier the better, one would say. Well, Omar, it has been an insightful conversation. Thank you for taking the time to chat to us at the Rugby Business Network, and keep up the amazing work you do.
No, thanks. Appreciate it, mate.